All right, guys, today is the thrilling conclusion to our off-season series, the Buy Low, Sell High series. And maybe not so thrilling. I know I'm going to rain a lot of fantasy darlings for a lot of people at the quarterback position, but we're going to talk through a list today of quarterbacks that I just don't think are going to deliver for fantasy football in 2023. And this could be a controversial one, so you don't want to miss it. As always, like the video, comment down below whether you agree with my list, subscribe if you're new, and let's cue that intro. Welcome back into Twin Takes Fantasy Football, and what a journey we have been on over the past few weeks, talking about just the entire landscape of the fantasy football positions, analyzing the market value and ADP of these current players, and where I think the ADP and the market value is wrong, whether they're way too high or way too low, and how you guys can exploit that to win your fantasy football championships in 2023. But that's all wrapping up to a close here today as we talk about the quarterbacks that I think are just way too overvalued in fantasy football, and you need to either move off of your team when it comes to dynasty or at least avoid them in redraft leagues. After this video, we're going to shift primarily to redraft content, so I really enjoyed getting into dynasty football for the first time, and I really enjoyed everyone who's been around for the ride, commenting, engaging with the YouTube videos. Hopefully it's helped you out a little bit in your dynasty leagues, and I'm looking forward to a great 2023 redraft season. But without further ado, let's get into the list. Let's start off with the most controversial one first. Why not? Let's get all the people hate commenting down below, and we're going to start off with Trey Lance. Trey Lance, this was a mistake. The number 3 overall draft pick by the San Francisco 49ers 2 years ago, it was absolutely a mistake, and this has been an experiment that has gone horribly, horribly wrong for Kyle Shanahan and company. There is a genuine chance, as we talked about last week, that he never starts another NFL game again. Obviously, his job seems to have been taken over pretty much by Brock Purdy, aka Mr. Relevant, after his dynamic display at the end of last year. And right now, there are rumors out of offseason training camp and OTAs that he is the third quarterback on the depth chart behind Brock Purdy as number 1 and Sam Darnold as the number 2. Things are just not trending in the right direction for Trey Lance. There's also quite a bit of rumors surrounding him that the 49ers were trying to move off of him during the draft, but there just wasn't any modicum of a trade market for Trey Lance, so it doesn't seem like there's really an opportunity for him with another team either. So that's why I have very genuine concerns about him never starting another NFL game. And after 2 years, it looks like the Trey Lance experiment might be over. Obviously, we talked about Brock Purdy came in and had an incredible run to end the 2022 fantasy football season. He's very competent in running that offense for Kyle Shanahan and the Kyle Shanahan system. And, the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, he got them to the NFC Championship game and potentially could have gotten them further if he didn't get his UCL damaged in the first drive of that game. And I think that overall, probably the direction that the 49ers are going to go with pending Brock Purdy's health. I mean, when you still look at Trey Lance, after missing all of last season, there's still an injury concern. So, again, when you have a lower body injury to a quarterback that's main threat is rushing, that's always a major, major concern for him coming back to the field. Obviously, he was always had to have some development as a passer. He was always very raw as a passing product with very minimal passing history throughout his college and high school career. And if, this injury is significant enough to take away from his rushing ability, it's going to really limit his ability as an overall quarterback. So I'm very, very, very concerned for what Trey Lance can do coming back from that injury. And this year is genuinely going to be make or break value. If Trey Lance has managed to find the field, which is a big if sitting behind Brock Purdy at the moment, but if he doesn't get on the field this year, I think that's going to be, the final nail in the coffin for Trey Lance's career. And listen, I get it. People are willing to take the risk on toolsy quarterbacks. People have seen what Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have been able to do and what they've been able to accomplish as far as their MVP caliber seasons over the past few years. But, if we look at historical trends of these toolsy quarterbacks outside of just those two outliers, it is still a very it's a very small hit chance for these toolsy quarterbacks to come in and make an impact, to take that jump to the next level, to develop the accuracy, to develop the pocket poise, to develop the football acumen in order to become a successful successful quarterback in the NFL. So despite these great success cases of Lamar and Josh Allen in the past few years, it's still very, very much an outlier for a toolsy quarterback like Trey Lance to take that step. And if we're looking at historical trends, the odds don't look like they are in Trey Lance's favor for him making the leap, especially after not having a successful first or second year. I mean, I think the only reason why we're still talking about Trey Lance is the first round draft capital, number 103 overall, and also being attached to the Kyle Shanahan name. I mean, we look at a guy that was taken last year in Malik Willis, probably has the same, not production at the NFL level, but if you look historically, they both had very, very limited production in college, obviously with Trey Lance at North Dakota State and Malik Willis at Liberty. They both came from very, very small school programs. They both were very, very toolsy quarterbacks that were raw when it came to passing. And after one mediocre year from Malik Willis, the Titans were all but happy to move on with him. And I think if Trey Lance was a third round quarterback, probably lines up really, really well with Malik Willis just stayed on. And I think there's just that draft capital fallacy where they're continuing to try to push Trey Lance because of the high draft capital investment the 49ers made in him. And I think at that point, you just have to realize that the draft pick was a bust and move on. And I think that time is sooner rather than later. So that's my tirade on Trey Lance. I just don't think that he's going to amount. I would love, again, I'm not rooting for him. I'm not rooting against him. I would love for him to come out and show me that I'm wrong, go to another team outside of the 49ers, become an incredible fantasy football or become an incredible NFL quarterback. I'm rooting for the kid. I genuinely am. I just don't think that his skill set genuinely isn't very translatable to facilitating a competent NFL offense. So while people are still high on him, while people still think that there's some value, I would highly recommend trading him. Trade him for a Jordan Love. Trade him for another young quarterback or maybe some veteran assets. Maybe I think you can still probably get a first rounder out of him for some people who are wildly inexplicably high on Trey Lance. This is your time to maximize. I think the experiment's over. So moving on to another guy that got a recent bump due to his recent offseason trade. Get rid of Aaron Rodgers, okay? This is not a recipe for success. Like, this is the same reason why I'm out on Garrett Wilson. First off, let's just talk about the New York Jets as a whole, as an organization that's just completely dysfunctional. When was the last time that something went according to plan in New York? I'm not very hopeful for what they can produce. And I think adding Aaron Rodgers to the mix is only going to add more fuel to the fire. He comes with a lot of drama. He comes with a lot of ego, and that won't fly in New York. Yes, you were a Packer for 18 years. He had the loyalty of Lambeau. It was also a small market team where, he had his time to, be by himself and not get harassed by the media. But the New York media is ruthless. We've seen this with the New York Knicks. We've seen this with the Giants. We've seen this with a lot of New York teams, regardless of the sport. And they're going, as soon as Aaron Rodgers has that one misstep, they're going to be all over him. And I think that his drama and his ego is going to clash quite a bit with the New York media, and it's going to cause quite the firestorm, both in the locker room, on the field. It just looks like a recipe for disaster for me. Especially in Dynasty, this man could retire after this year. He's been contemplating retirement the past 2 to 3 off seasons as a legitimate choice. And if things don't go well in New York for Aaron, he's out of here. He's made plenty of money. He doesn't have to be around, doesn't have to collect checks anymore. He's generationally wealthy. So if he doesn't like what things are going, if the Jets aren't going to acquiesce to him, if the media is going to absolutely lambast him every day or each week after the game, if they underperform, Aaron Rodgers could just be like, peace guys, I'm out, leaving, and you're stuck holding the bag on a quarterback that really wasn't that productive. And I say he wasn't productive, and you're like, oh, but he had his back-to-back MVP years. That was a few years ago, and I think it's not as relevant as people keep saying. He is a talented quarterback, but the weapons around him were not as bad as people made it out to seem. The offensive support staff that he had with Matt LaFleur, not as bad as people made it out to seem. He had a great structure around him for him to be successful in Green Bay, especially in a weak division that he could just carve up week in and week out. So I get it. He's a talented quarterback. I'm not saying he's not talented. I just don't think they're as relevant, especially given the poor play last year. It's always been it's not Aaron's fault. It's always the scapegoat. It's always a lack of weapons. It's always the play calling. It's always this. It's always that. It's never Aaron's fault, but sometimes we just have to look at the truth of the situation, and he did not play well last year. Even without, even accounting for the lack of Devontae Adams, he was still abysmal, especially when it came to fantasy football. And a part of that is that, the running backs were more involved. AJ Dillon was more involved. Aaron Jones was more involved. And obviously, that takes away rush or opportunities from Aaron Rodgers and the quarterback to acquire points in the passing game, especially a guy that doesn't really run as much. He's not really a dual threat quarterback, but he goes to this New York Jets team and Robert Saleh, who is from, yes, that's right, the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree, where they're very, very heavily invested in the running game. And they drafted a running back last year with pretty high draft capital at the top of the second round, who they quite like in Breece Hall. And I think he's going to be a massive part of their offensive scheme when he comes back from his ACL injury. They also still have Michael Carter. They also still have Zonovan Bam Knight, and they drafted Izzy Abanikanda in the 4th round. All of this indicates to me that Robert Saleh does want to take the focus off of Aaron in the passing game a little bit, and also focus quite a bit on the rushing game. Again, taking fantasy points out of Aaron Rodgers' hands. And finally, this is not the easy NFC North that he's used to playing. He is in the AFC East, which is a brutal division. Genuinely, all 4 teams have the chance to be playoff contenders. Maybe not so much with the Patriots, but they've been a historically great team with a historically great defense, and I think it's going to be a much higher level of competition for Aaron Rodgers to play up against than he's normally used to. So, if you can get him, if you want to get rid of him and send him to a contending team who thinks there's hype around Aaron for a 2nd round pick, do it. Full confidence in getting rid of him off your team. Moving on to our 3rd quarterback of this list, it's going to be the newest addition to the New Orleans Saints. That's right, quarterback Derek Carr. People get hyped about Derek Carr season in, season out, but I just don't think he has that ceiling that everyone perceives him to have. If we just take a little scroll down here, look at all his career finishes. Do you see any green? Because I don't see any green. No green is not good. His best finish was quarterback 13, which was 2 seasons ago, but I see a lot of 17, a lot of 19, multiple 20s here. I mean, he is that just perennially okay quarterback. He's quarterback 14 to 18 in the NFL. He's good, he's consistent, but he's never going to be a difference maker at that position. And no matter what happens, people thought they were going to be high on him when they brought in Devontae Adams. Didn't change. Going to a new situation, still doesn't change. It's just, there's always talk about, how he could take that next step, how he is competent as a quarterback. And he is. He's just not going to be a difference maker as a fantasy football asset. This is also, when we talk about the weapons that Derek Carr has to work with, he's had, a luxury of weapons the past few years. He's had Darren Waller. He's had Hunter Renfrow, who I'm quite high on. He's had even Devontae Adams last year. And it's going to be, and if he can't get it done with those guys, there's no way he can get it done in this offense. You have Chris Olave, who is an ascending superstar, and I get that. I do love Chris Olave as a prospect. But then you have Michael Thomas, and there's no guarantee he stays in the field, given his history over the past 3 years. And also, we just have to look at the offseason moves by the Saints to notice that this is going to be a rushing-based team, and a team that really leans into the running aspect of the offensive play scheme. Well, it's not going to be very beneficial for the quarterback. They brought in Jamal Williams, and they drafted Kendre Miller in the 3rd round, day 2 draft capital, very high. And all of that screams to me that this is going to be a team with Dennis Allen building a lot of the offense around the running game. And I think they can facilitate that very well in a very weak conference like the NFC South. He should really be a desperation to, if you're in a super flex and you need a quarterback too, and you're desperate, maybe throw a flyer on Derek Carr. But, this is not a long-term move. This is a guy that he signed a 3-year deal. He could be out of there realistically after 2 seasons. I think that, the Grim Reaper is coming calling for Derek Carr's NFL career. I don't think as a starter, his days are quite numbered, and I think I'll be trying to move off of him. While he still has some perceived value with, reinvigorating his career down in New Orleans, I think I'd move off him and try to go younger. Also, we have to mention that in New Orleans, even with the addition of Trevor Penning last year, it was still one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL, and Derek Carr has been one of the worst passers when it comes to throwing under pressure. Just has one of the highest sack rates under pressure, has one of the highest incompletion rates under pressure, and one of the highest turnover rates under pressure. So I really don't like that combination with the O-line down there in New Orleans, and he just, when you talk about a quarterback that you want leading your team, you guys, just the way that the game is developing and evolving, you need guys with the rushing upside. Derek Carr does not provide that whatsoever. All right, so moving on to our fourth quarterback on this list, and that's going to be Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. I mean, this should be pretty obvious from the get-go, but I have major injury concerns around what Tua had happened to him last year. I mean, he never played a full season in the NFL despite, this going into his fourth season. Whether it was concerns with him coming into taking the job away from an aging Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Ryan Fitzpatrick still getting the job over Tua, and then the past 2 seasons with all of his injury woes have just all incredibly concerning with Tua. He genuinely in this past offseason considered retirement due to those injury concerns. So if you look at a guy that could potentially be out of the NFL despite his age being 25, he has, a very realistic chance if he gets that one more amazing hit or one more big hit or one more bad injury. He's collected his bag. He got the first round quarterback money. He could take it and he could, try to do something else with his life to protect his health, which I think would be a smart idea. But having him retire in the next few years is really not out of the picture for Tua, which is incredibly concerning given his history. I do get that there's still that promise, like when he's on the field, when he's working the Mike McDaniels offense, when he has Tyreek and Waddle running at full efficiency, when he has Raheem Mostert, Devon Achane, potentially even Dalvin Cook coming, like the plethora of weapons that he has to work with is absolutely insane, and he is incredible at facilitating the ball to these weapons, but he needs to be on the field for that. And again, as I've iterated so many times during this segment, his ability to stay on the field is a serious question for me. The other big thing about Tua, he does not have an extension. The Miami Dolphins picked up his 5th-year option, and I think they're going to play out his entire rookie contract before giving him an extension. And there is no commitment by the Dolphins to continue with Tua after his rookie contract. We've seen them go out and try to replace him. They got their draft pick revoked for going and meeting with Tom Brady. There were significant trade talks with them acquiring Deshaun Watson. It is not out of the realm of possibility that Miami looks at this situation and says, we have a great offense, we have a budding defense after trading for Jalen Ramsey. We just need to go get a veteran quarterback. Tua is not the answer. Tua cannot stay healthy. And they go out and they, third time's the charm. Missed out on Deshaun Watson, missed out on Brady. They could go and try to get another veteran after this offseason. Not sure who that would be, but it's just the lack of commitment by Miami Dolphins organizations to Tua is something that should be monitored, and it should be a cause for concern with his NFL career going forward. Even outside of the injury concerns, I'm mad at. So last one, a guy that I think, whether you're rebuilding or competing right now, it's a guy that you need to sell right now. His value will never be higher than it is at this moment right now. This is the highest Daniel Jones will ever be as a value, and this is why. Last season was a great season for him. I mean, he had a great fantasy football finishing top 9. That's not something that no one expected out of Daniel Jones. But, I mean, if we look at his history, this is an outlier season, a truly outlier season. We're looking at 25, 24, 27, 9. I think that, a little bit of that is he had a great upgrade at the coaching position. Brian Daboll is an offensive guru. I love what Brian Daboll brings to the table, but I don't think that Daniel Jones really can make that leap to be a perennial top 10 quarterback. And I think he kind of regresses towards the mean in 2023 and beyond. And that, the 2022 season, the top 10 season, it was indeed an outlier. And a lot of it has to do with the Giants kind of shooting themselves in the foot with the contract that they gave Daniel Jones. With that 4-year, $160 million contract, this kind of has the potential to stick them in that quarterback purgatory scenario where they're always good enough to be competing for that playoff spot and being talked about in that conversation, but they're never going to have that elite talent or that elite upside to make the jump, get to the NFC Championship game, but they're also not going to be bad enough to go out and get a top-end quarterback like a Caleb Williams or a Drake May without sacrificing serious draft capital. I think the situation that this contract puts them in as a middling team is kind of spells a pretty poor picture for the offensive efficiency overall, for the total points scored by the offense overall. And, an average quarterback on an average team is something that's genuinely not going to be productive for fantasy football. The way the contract is structured, it is heavily front loaded. So even if what I'm predicting is right, and Daniel Jones does regress towards the mean, and he does kind of fall off a little bit. They can move on from Daniel Jones after 2 years. It's not a long-term contract like a Kyler Murray contract, like a Jalen Hurts contract, like a Lamar Jackson contract that will guarantee them relevancy for the next 4 years. He does have decent rushing ability. He's very athletic and did a lot of work on the ground. Won a lot of people fantasy championships with, the 2 rushing TDs during the championship weekend in week 17. But I'm still not sold on his ability as a passer. And if you want longevity in the NFL as a quarterback, you need to develop the ability to pass. And listen, rushing buys you time. It buys you the time to develop as a passer. That's what we saw with Jalen Hurts. It's what we saw with Justin Fields last year. He wasn't a great passer, but his ability to run and facilitate an offense primarily on the ground bought him time to come in this year and see what he could do and if he could develop as a passer. Now, Daniel Jones, given that he already has 4 years experience, he's way past that ability where Justin Fields, he's going into his 3rd year. Josh Allen, when he developed as a passer, he went into his 3rd year. Lamar Jackson really took steps as a passer in his 2nd and 3rd year. Daniel Jones entering his 5th year. This is something that is actually quite concerning. I think that we are way past the breakout age of him developing as a truly accurate passer. Again, Brian Dable could work a magic, but it's a very, very slim possibility that this late into Daniel Jones' career, he is able to make that leap as a passer to keep him fantasy relevant. So right now, with the big contract, with the perceived value, with how good he was last year, get rid of Daniel Jones. You could probably get a 1st-round plus for him, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that be willing to jump at him as a decent quarterback too, because that's what he was last year. So, but in my opinion, the value will never be higher, and get him off your team right now. All right, guys, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the video. 5 quarterbacks that I am looking to either get off my team in Dynasty or avoid in drafts going into redraft 2023. Can't wait to read all the comments down below telling me how wrong I am and let the debates commence. But I hope you guys enjoyed this series, going in and analyzing all the data from the draft, from offseason trades, from signings, from hype, from injury concerns, all of that media that we've just consumed over the past 6 months of no football, and analyzing where the players stand, and hopefully gives you a little bit of an edge over just the average casual fantasy football fan. And with that being said, we're going to take a look primarily towards redraft going forward. I'm sure there's a lot of fantasy dynasty channels that are going to monitor a lot of the college prospects throughout the NFL season. While I love college football, I don't have the capacity to do both, NFL football and college. So, that's going to probably wrap it up for dynasty. I'm a huge dynasty fan, so maybe there's some dynasty videos that come out every once in a while if I'm feeling up to it, but we should look for dynasty content to resume post 2023 football season. But, in the meantime, we got the thing called redraft and 2023 fantasy season to look forward to. Got a lot of content coming up for that. I'm really excited going into the 2nd year doing this. I think we're going to take a lot of jumps and have a much, much better year this year. And I'm glad for all those of you who have chosen to come along for the ride. So as always, take care.